Hey guys, Legendaray here, and welcome back to another Clash Royale video. Today, if you take a look at the challenges tab, you'll see that the Season 15 Global Tournament starts off early next week. So of course, you're going to want to get as many wins in that as possible because there are quite a few rewards to be earned on those tracks. Now, of course, as usual, I'm about to go over the top 5 decks to run in this current Season 15 meta. Of course, all of these decks have been taken off of 12-win grand challenges as well as in top ladder, so you know that these decks work insanely well. In addition to that, I also took into account how easy the deck is to pick up and play, so the 5 decks that I'll be sharing today are also going to be decks that you probably will be able to pick up within a couple of initial matches. Of course, for each deck, I'm going to go over a quick breakdown of the synergies and strategies for each one, and as always, the deck link will be down in the description for those of you to check out. And hey, while you're there, be sure to leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. Also, go check me out on my Instagram and Twitter, links down below, and if you'd like to support me in-game, feel free to use code Legendaray in the shop. And with all that out of the way, let's get right into the list. Number 1. Lavahound. Now this Lavahound variation has been by far the best Lavahound variant for pretty much the entirety of Season 15. Now this deck is super easy to play, so let's go ahead and quickly break it down. So the main objective of this deck is to obviously build up massive Lavahound pushes over and over again to eventually either chip down your opponent's tower or just take it down in a big beatdown push. So starting off the match, I'll generally be a little bit more passive, especially if I have the Lavahound in hand. That's because as soon as I see my opponents play an air counter in the back or waste one of their air counters, then I'll go ahead and just immediately play a Lavahound in that same lane. This is because the opponent's air counters will be out of cycle and you can begin building up your own Lavahound push, knowing that your opponents are also not going to be that high on elixir. After that, the gist of this deck is rather simple. You go ahead and support the Lavahound with the balloons, the skeleton dragons, as well as the miner once the Lavahound is getting close to popping. In addition, the miner can be sent to a musketeer or something on the opponent's defense to begin sniping and damaging that musketeer away. Now, one thing that I will want you to take note of is to not give too much spell value, because this deck is rather weak to a lot of medium to large spells. So especially if your opponents have something like a fireball or a rocket, you really don't want to be grouping up the balloon as well as the skeleton dragons all together, giving your opponents just so much value and allowing for them to get a positive elixir trade. Instead, you can oftentimes hold back on those pushes, force out your opponents to use their spells, and then continue supporting the pushes afterwards. Now, in terms of defense, also very simple. Inferno Dragon and Barbarians can take care of any tanks, and the Skeleton Dragons can deal a great bit of splash. Miner can also be used as a tank on defense if you're in a pinch, because you only have 2 ground counters in this deck, so you can be a little more creative with your miners. Number 2. Royal Giant Cycle. Now this deck has been on so many of my top 5 lists that I'm sure it is a very familiar deck. Of course, this is going to be a bit of a faster Royal Giant deck, therefore you're going to be playing this deck rather aggressively. So starting off with this deck, you're obviously cycling some of your cards at the beginning. The Skeletons, the Heal Spirit, Splitting Skeleton Dragons, or a Barbell at the bridge are all great ways to start and force out a move from your opponent. After that, you can either Royal Giant opposite lane or just focus on defending whatever your opponent plays. If they play something expensive in the back, just roll a giant opposite lane and go ahead and stay rather aggressive. The point of being aggressive is to force your opponents to spend a ton of elixir defending your offensive pushes that they simply do not have the elixir or the time to build up a push of their own. So when you're going in with Royal Giant pushes, of course, you're going to have to be rather selective of what you're going to defend with. If you know that they have swarms to take out the Royal Giant, get your Fireball, your Skeleton Dragons, as well as your Barbell ready. If they have a big tank to take out your Royal Giant, go ahead and support the Royal Giant with a Fisherman so that the Fisherman can pull that defense away. Finally, go ahead and support the Royal Giant with that Heal Spirit, and as soon as that Heal Spirit connects, you're pretty much guaranteed a ton of damage onto the opponent's tower, because Heal Spirit is honestly still a little bit busted. Now, in terms of defense, the goal here is that you are able to keep high enough pressure that you don't have to play too much intense defense, but this deck can of course still deliver. First First off, Fisherman can pull away a ton of tanks as well as activate King Tower. The Hunter is mostly going to be used to take out medium to high health units, and then the Skeleton Dragons will be able to dish out a ton of damage against splashers as well as other air units. Last but not least, Spell Cycle is also a big option in this deck, especially in Triple Elixir when you're just trying to beat your opponents on damage. Number 3. Mega Knight Royal Hogs. Now this deck is one that has been relatively meta for quite a while now, but over the past couple of weeks it has definitely moved its way up into one of the top decks for September. Now this deck is going to be a bit of a slower deck than the one that I just featured, so starting off the match you can cycle a bar barrel or split your skeleton dragons, but generally I will be waiting for my opponent to make that first big commitment. After that, generally I'll go ahead and play that musketeer, but if I think they may be running balloon, then I will generally save that. After that, you're just gonna want to begin to find the best opportunities to build up your pushes. Of course, your win condition is going to be those Royal Hogs, so you're going to have to play those when the timing is right. Now, as your first push with the Royal Hogs, it generally is okay to just go in with all the Hogs in the same lane, because at the beginning of the match, you're just trying to figure out what counters your opponents have to those Royal Hogs. After that, you can begin to try and figure out how exactly you want to build up your pushes. If they have a ton of splash damage or they are running some sort of cycle deck, then consider splitting your Royal Hogs, because that mitigates the splash value of a lot of your opponent's units and forces them to split their defenses into each of the two lanes. In addition, this deck is also a little bit of a spell bait deck in that you're trying to bait out the medium spell. The Skeleton Dragons, the Musketeer, and the Royal Hogs are all those fireball bait units, so if your opponent fireballs out one of those, then you're probably going to be pretty safe going with one of the other two cards. Now, the Mega Knight is another huge card in this deck. In general, I will be playing this card more on defense as a reactive play, because a lot of times the opponents will just stack up a ton of units together and the Mega Knight splash damage can just pop down and destroy pretty much all of it. Then you can go ahead and use that Mega Knight on a counter push, because the Mega Knight is super tanky unit, so more often than not it will be surviving your defenses. So again, you can go ahead and apply some double lane pressure with the Royal Hogs, with the Mega Knight, and with those Skeleton Dragons. Now the Fisherman is also a very useful card in this deck, not only to pull away a lot of your opponent's defenses, but also to get activated King's Towers, as well as to pull units away from your towers on a defense. All in all, a very well-rounded deck, albeit a little bit on the expensive side, so make sure that you are not overly aggressive, end up giving your opponents too much spell value, and get pummeled by a massive counter push. Number 4. Ram Rider Bridge Spam. Now this is a bit of a traditional bridge spam deck that recently has become quite popular in the meta. Now this deck is kind of pseudo aggressive in that you're, for the most part of the match, you're going to be a little bit more on the passive side, but when you have the chance, you can just spam at the bridge like crazy. So starting off the match, you can play like a bandit or a bar barrel or a heal spirit just to apply some quick pressure and force your opponents on their toes. After that, you're going to want to focus on defending and then counter pushing with your fast units. One of your most useful defensive units is going to be the Magic Archer, so it's super important that you protect that Magic Archer as best as possible. With that far range, it can get so much value across the entire arena, so keeping it healthy can get you a lot of value. Aside from that, the Lumberjack and the Inferno Dragon are going to be obviously to take out those tanks, and the Ram Rider is actually surprisingly a unit that I actually use quite a bit on defense. Because that snare actually slows down the opponent's units, it's actually really useful to buy your towers, your Magic Archers, and your Lumberjacks enough time to actually damage down units. This is actually going to be insanely useful against air decks, so against a lot of air decks, I will definitely be saving that Ram Rider to slow down those balloons and Lavahounds. Last but not least, this is of course a bridge spam deck, so with any counter push you have, go ahead and support that with a bandit, with a bar barrel, with a Lumberjack, so on and so forth, and just by simply applying quick pressure at the bridge, you can oftentimes force your opponents to really overextend on defense, meaning that they won't have elixir for their own counter push. The Magic Archer can also be a great way to get chip damage onto the tower. If you have a bandit or a Lumberjack heading down the lane and the opponent places a big tank in the way, you can oftentimes just use that Magic Archer geometry to snipe that tower down and get a couple hundred HP before the opponent can take the Magic Archer out. All in all, as long as you're able to identify when to go aggressive and when to hold back, you're going to be able to play this deck very, very effectively. Number 5, Giant Skeleton Balloon. Now this is a bit of a new balloon deck that I've seen popping up now, but it actually does surprisingly well. It's kind of a mix between Splash Yard and a balloon cycle deck, so of course the playstyle is going to be more of a mix of the two. So for the most part, you're going to be playing this deck like a control deck. So you're starting off really slowly. You can send in a miner or a bar barrel, but for the most part, you just really want to defend the opponent's first push and react to whatever they play, with maybe an Ice Wizard or a Giant Skeleton or the Bomb Tower. The control on this defense is actually insane because the Ice Wizard, Baby Dragon, and Bomb Tower all pair super duper well with the Tornado. So on defense, you're pretty much able to control units all across the arena so that you can defend pushes rather effectively. The Ice Wizard slows units down, the Baby Dragon and Bomb Tower can damage everything down, and if needed, the Giant Skeleton is a super effective tank as well as lane clogger to just pretty much blow up everything in that lane. Now on offense, the Giant Skeleton can also be very effective. More often than not, I may have a surviving Giant Skeleton off of a defense and then just go ahead and support a balloon behind that Giant Skeleton. One thing that I find very useful is once that Giant Skeleton dies, tornado everything into the Giant Skeleton bomb, and that'll oftentimes clear up pretty much all of your opponent's defense, leaving that balloon to just head straight for the opponent's tower. The tornado is such an important card in this deck. It synergizes with pretty much every single card, so make sure that you're putting that tornado to some good use. Last but not least, it is important to note that this deck does not have a big spell, so towards the end of the match, you're going to want to be trying to consistently get balloon death damage onto the tower as well as minor chip damage. This way, you're able to slowly chip your opponent's tower down to 0 or just win off of an end game tiebreaker. Again, all in all, you're just trying to focus on defense first, building up counter pushes, and then sending in that balloon, sending in that miner to just take out your opponent's tower. So there we go. Those are the top 5 decks that I would recommend you guys run in Season 15. Again, these are all decks that I have done some research on and have proven to do really well in this current meta. Again, deck links for each deck will be down in the description for those of you that are interested. So go ahead and pick one of those down below and give it a try before the global tournament starts. But unfortunately, guys, that's all I've got time for in today's episode. Huge thanks to all of my channel members. You guys are the absolute G's. If you enjoyed, please leave a like down below as well as a subscription to my channel. And as always, this is Legendaray, and I'm signing off. See you guys next time.